सच में तुम्हारा लाइट नहीं है भाई, क्या बात. Okay. Thank you, Divya, and thanks Chairperson, Center for the Study of Social System, Professor Manoj Jana. Thank you. As you know that this is an old tradition in our center to have this Thursday colloquium, but you all audience make it very formal. I was thinking, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of chatting here and there, but now the title, as you have seen actually by now, reading Indian Sociology through the Indian knowledge system, philosophical and methodological possibilities. You know, I think most of the sociologists who are there, they know that we have been using Indian sources, and Indian sources we have used for the structures, we have used Indian sources for processes, and also we have used for institutional mechanism as well as personality formations. And Indian sources have been given to us, you know, through three very important sources. One, of course, the Vedas. The second are the epics, and third are the, vernaculars, or we call it saint poets. Their knowledge system is also, given to us. But over the years, I have been looking at our cohort, our group, every teacher in the center, we have been talking about that whether these sources have been incorporated critically with reflexivity or they have been taken as given. And that's where the role of social scientists begins. So friends, in this small little background, I will begin with Professor Weissing, the founder of this center, and his book, Modernization of Indian Tradition. And that gave me a little bit of cushion that what I am trying to do. According to Weissing, the tracing of the development of Indian culture and society, it's difficult. It's not easy because there have not been, a consensus to understand the culture, development and history of the Indian society itself. The historians and ethnographers both, they have not been able to decide the relationship even between Indus Valley civilization and Vedic civilization. And therefore, it's very difficult to actually look at. Similarly, Weissing also argues that the controversy about the nature and relationship between Aryan culture and Vedic period culture and also the tribal culture, that is also, it's going on and there is no single way. So from where we'll trace actually and how we can view the civilizational aspect of the Indian society. So some sociological formations, exactly, he's trying to argue that 100 BC, from 1000 BC is the time period until actually 500 BC, that is the time period during which the orthogenetic conceptualization of the tradition can be looked at. The indigenous, the internal development, and I'm not taking the orthogenetic sources of change. Rather, we are talking about only the conceptualization, which is orthogenetic. Now, this forms Vedic Hinduism, especially its manifestation during the period of epics, laid down the foundation of the system of belief, ritual, patterns, cultural practices, and they are today distinct. And therefore, the religious and cultural tradition must be traced through these indigenous sources only. Now, having said this, my first question is, can we evolve a subject matter? My victims of methodology class, they know actually what do I mean by methodology. And methodology is always the subject matter. So what is the subject matter actually? Can we really talk about or evolve the subject matter of Indian sociology on the basis of values enshrined in Indian society? Now, there are different types of values, but for me, I am thinking that two very important values. One is universal value and another is particularistic. So can we really think that we can evolve the subject matter of Indian sociology through the universal values? And where will you find these values? You will find these values in the Shastras, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the epics, the Smritis, the sutras, and the in the oral tradition of the saint poets, as they say. I call them as mukti ka andolan karne wale. Those people actually also can be included. Now, I will just like to look at that how these universal values have been enshrined in the epics and also in the Upanishads. So first example comes from Maha Upanishad, that is chapter 6, verse 71 to 75. And this is, very, very recently when I think G20 was actually being, hosted by India, and this whole was actually written. This epithet was written every nook and corner. So I was, interested to look at what is this, the whole verse behind. So what does it say? Ayam nij paraveti garna laghu chetasam, ayam nij paraveti garna laghu chetasam, udar charita nam tu vasudev kudumbakam. Now this is mine, that is yours. This is actually done by the narrow-minded people. For magnanimous and for benevolent, the whole world is a family. That is somewhere, I think, beginning of the universal value in the Indian society. The second shloka comes from 9th mandala of Rig Veda. Now, Rig Veda, 9th mandal, Purusukta, that is actually just before Purusukta. And this Sukta says that Indriyam vardhanto aptura, Indriyam vardhanto aptura, Kranavanto vishwam ayam, Kranavanto vishwam aryam, Abghananto avarana. That means amplifying the divine power and making the whole world noble, while deriving away or driving away the mean-minded people. So how to make actually the whole world noble? That is the spirit, that is the aspiration of our people. And then the third comes from Brihad Aranakya Upanishad says that Sarve bhavantu sikhna, Sarve santu niramaya, Sarve bhadrani pashyantu, Kadaschit dhug bhag bhavet. That means everybody, I think you can understand little bit this. I don't have to translate everything. But friends, actually, this is not only actually, these are some few examples which I have taken, but there are also from other, epics like Gita. There are also, universalistic values, shlokas, which are being posted for the society that you can follow. And therefore, you can really make good character, and because of that, there will be a nice society. And one of the important shlokas, which is Santosham Param Sukham. That is actually, do not be, be content actually. Contentment is the best policy. That is what actually is trying to argue. And then we can also think of कर्मण्येवाधिकार अस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्म फल हेतु भूष te sangatosvo akarmani. That means actually you don't have to think of the products of the karma. You have the only right to karma. Now all these texts are from Vedic literature or epics. But universal value is not only enshrined in these texts only, Vedic and epics. Rather, Buddhist texts also talk about universal value. And I am only taking actually few of them, or one of them rather. And everybody talks about that how actually five precepts of the Buddhism that I take or I undertake training to abstain from killing, from harming the others, or from stealing, from sexual misconduct, from harmful speech, and also I take refuge or I take a precept not to be involved in intoxicant liquors. Panatipata vermani Sikha padang samadhyami. Adhinna dana vermani Sikha padang samadhyami. Kameshu mikshachara vermani Sikha padang samadhyami. Musa vada vermani Sikha padang samadhyami. Sura mer maj pamat tathana vermani Sikha padang samadhyami. Here vermani is basically abstinence, and Sikha, that is I take training, and samadhyami I undertake. I think this is also for everyone. If you are really taking actually discourse of Buddhists, then definitely you will be. Now, having done that, the last part of this universal value comes from the saint poets of Nirguna saints of the Bhakti. I call this as Mukti movement rather than Bhakti movement. And in this actually I am trying to talk about Ravidas, and Ravidas is talking about a society which is egalitarian, the utopia of a person who has not gone to a university, who has not got a scientific temperament or you can training in the university, and yet they talk about the good of the society. And you know the utopia of Begumpura given by Ravidas. And what does he say? ऐसा चाहूं राज में जहां मिले सबन को अन्न, छोट बड़े सब संबसे रैदास रहे प्रसन्न. That means he wants an egalitarian society. And why was he forced to actually say that? I think people must not be getting food. That's why he was forced to say सबको मिले अन्न. And then he was also talking about the 17th century saint is also talking about annihilation of caste. जात जात में जात है तिन केलन के पात, रहदास न मानुख बन सके मानुख जब तक जात न जात. That means unless and until caste goes away, human being will not be human being. That is what the utopia given by the Nirgun Shakha, or you can say Nirgun saint poet. Now, this actually is something very, very, I think it should be considered by the sociologists, that we in the Indian knowledge system, we did not have only particularistic value, rather we also had universalistic values. But I have not read a paragraph on universalistic value in the Indian sociology text. I have yet to read, maybe somebody may correct me, but with my limited knowledge, I have not read. But this is not all that we have actually very universalistic values in the Indian knowledge system. Rather, there was also, or there is a tinge of very progressive structural location also, or structure, formation of structure, the exhalation of certain epics are like that we want a very progressive social structure. Now this actually universal value with I will say the progressive values are involved or enshrined in the shlokas of Gita. And I actually begin with chapter 4, shloka 13, where Krishna is exalting and narrating. Chaturvarnayam maya shrashtam, Chaturvarnayam maya shrashtam gun karma vibhaksha. Chaturvarnayam maya shrashtam gun karma vibhaksha tasya karmarapi mam vidh kartar avvayam. That means actually these four varnas I have created on the basis of guna, that is qualities, and karma, that is action. But friends, it is not that actually that he has said that okay, four varnas are created like that, but the shloka can further be substantiated by Skandha Purana, Aitreya Smriti, shloka 141. Aitreya Smriti, Skandha Purana, shloka 141. And the shloka says, Janam na jayate shudra. Janam na jayate shudra sanskarat dvij uchyate. Janam na jayate shudra sanskarat dvij uchyate. Ved pathat bhaved vipra. Brahma janati brahmana. Now here, when we look at that how Bhagavad Gita is, and that to Krishna is exalted, which is considered to be God, is talking about a value system that look, social structure has to be based on the qualities and the action. And friends, what happened to us then? That the gunas theory, we all know that Bhagavad Gita is not only talking about these exaltation that for the social structure should be based on varnas, or which is based on qualities, but there are also guna which have been given in our sacred texts. For example, there are three types of guna, and I also take it from this chapter 14 of Gita, and they say that there are three types of guna: the sattva, rajas, and tamas, darkness. Now these gunas behind the soul, these gunas bind the soul, and because of this, actually, you have also the nature. You have actually also the nature, how to function. And there is actually, other shlokas also, which are trying to talk about the qualities of the people, which have acceptable qualities in the society. But friends, what has happened over the years? These universal values and progressive values are set aside by our sociologists. And what sociologists have done? They have brought Rig Veda. Rig Veda, Purush Sukta, 10th Mandal, which talks about that how the four varnas were born. They have been telling you. And this actually is, I am talking about 90th Richa. The exact reference of 90th Richa, which says, and this actually is in a question answer form, and in question answer form, they are asking, Yad Purusham Vyavadahu Kadidha Vai Kalpavan. Jis Purush ki aapne kalpana ki hai, the Purush you have actually, imagined. Kimas Mukh. Uska Mukh kaisa hai? What is his mouth? Kau Bahu. Again I am repeating, Kau Bahu. There is no term Kshatriya. It is being asked also. And yet we are being taught Kshatriya. Kau Bahu, Kau Ur Pad Uchet. Ur and Pad. The fourth or the fifth Karmendri. I'll come. And the answer goes like this. In the Hayam, Brahmano Mukham Asit, Brahman Mukh hua. Dui Bahu Rajanya Krita. Rajanya Krita. Not Kshatriya Krita. Rajanya Krita. Ur Tadasya Dvaish Padabhyam Shudra Ajayat. I was actually looking at how many richas are there in Rig Veda. And I got that there are 10,580 richas in Rig Veda. And I don't know actually, I have to meet some of the founding members when I go up, that actually, how did you find one richa? What reflexivity, what discussion and debates took place that out of 10,580 richa, one richa, even though there were so many progressive values in Indian society, you brought this hierarchical values in the society or in the sociological texts. Okay. Now, it is not that, friends, that, this actually has been accepted by every sociologist, that a hierarchical system existed. Vivek Kumar Sarkar, in his book, Positive Background of Hindu Sociology, confirms. And he says that there is no environment of hierarchy in Rig Veda. There is no environment of hierarchy in Rig Veda. Why? Because, there are different parts of the body which have been used for emergence of different institutions. Now, according to him, Purush Sukta, actually, he says that these items are mentioned haphazardly. They have not been mentioned sequentially, like first came head and then came eyes, then came hand and then came actually feet. No, that is not haphazardly, because he says that, the Purusha's mouth became Brahman at one level. At one instance, it is saying Purusha's mouth became Brahman. But at the other level, he says Indra and Agni sprang from the mouth. Indra and Agni sprang from the mouth. Similarly, Purusha's breath gave birth to god of wind. That means breath must be coming out from mouth. The third is that from the navel of Purusha emerged air. There's a difference between air and wind. That means now actually one wind comes from the navel and another wind comes from the mouth. So where is the hierarchy? Similarly, moon was born from mind and sun is born from eyes. Now that means moon should acquire a higher pedestal and sun should actually be placed at lower level, but we know that actually moon's light comes only from sun, and therefore you are making sun dependent or you are making moon dependent, nobody knows. So what he writes very critically, Purush Sukta does not tell anything about the relation of each varna with other varna. Hence, we cannot know how did Indian sociologists have given such importance and hype to Rig Veda theory of the varna. Further, he says that Indian sociologists cannot use the same logic or different logics in the same varna. You cannot use the different logic for actually different aspects or for different institutions in the same sukta, and therefore it is not logical. But friend, that is not all. Prabhati Mukherjee in her book Beyond Four Varnas writes that the groups other than Brahman, Kshatri, Vaishya, what were the other groups which were available? The Dasas, that they have been referred 50 times in Rig Veda. Similarly, the Rakshasas have been referred 20 times. The Paisage, the Asurs 7 times, and Panis 13 times. Sarkar also mentions the groups, the Nagas, the Rakshasas, the Asuras, the Paisach and the Dasas in the Rig Veda. My problem is, had our sociologist told us that, there are other groups also in Rig Veda and their culture is this, because certain groups are lampooned, they are criticized, they are condemned as Paisach, as Rakshasas. But what was their culture? What was their actually nature? Why sociologists have not incorporated to give Indian society a much larger actually picture, rather than reducing it to the four varnas? That is my another question. Now friends, come actually the status of women in the sacred texts. I have yet to read the sociologists. They have mentioned the status of women in the sacred texts. So I took refuge in Baba Saheb Ambedkar, volume 3, and I think his interaction or his analysis is very important. Indian sociologists have not taken actually care, or they have done with Varna, but not about the status of the women. But Ambedkar, in his essay, The Woman and the Counter-Revolution, looks at least 7 historical sources to highlight how were they treated before the times of Manu Smriti. And Ambedkar analyzed Atharva Veda 1, Sarauta Sutra 2, Panini's Ashtadhyayi 3, Patanjali's Mahabhashya 4, Bahudayan Sutra, and 6, Kautilya's Arthashastra, and 7th, public debates between Janaka and Sulabha, public debate between Yagvalk and Maitri, Yagvalk and Gargi, and Shankara between Vidyadhari. Now these are 7 sources through which Ambedkar tries to analyze the status of women. And according to Ambedkar, in Atharva Veda, a girl becomes eligible only after she has furnished or finished her brahmacharya, that means after puberty. That means there was no child marriage during that period, according to Ambedkar. In Sarauta Sutra, it is clear that the women were allowed to be taught Vedas, and they read Vedas. Panini's Ashtadhyayi bears the testimony that women attended Gurukula and studied various sakhas of the Vedas and became expert in Mimamsa. Patanjali's Mahabhashya shows that women were teachers and taught Vedas to girl students. Bahudayan Griha Sutra highlights that the marriage will be solemnized only after puberty. Kautilya's Arthashastra mentions monogamy, and second, Kautilya's time, women could claim divorce. And also, they were actually talking about that there was no widow remarriage. Also, during Kautilya's time, Arthashastra says every precaution was taken for guarantee of economic independence of a married woman. As far as dialogue between Janaka and Sulabha is concerned, you know that Sulabha asserted with Janak, you have to do a dialogue. And Janak was saying, no, I can't have a dialogue with you. You are a woman, I want. Now, Sulabha says that we belong to a civilization where soul has no gender, and therefore you have to enter in dialogue. In all what I am trying to argue, that there was a status which was actually quite equivalent to a general public, where women can enter in dialogue, have an independent life, read and study and property as well. Even actually, though Manusmriti was not very kind, Manusmriti says, Yatra naryastu pujyante ramante tatra devta. And if Nari is not pujyante, then sarvatya sarvanasha. That means actually there will be all that. But friends, what happens that no one knows that why and Manu in Indian society has actually created a havoc in the lives of the Indian woman. This actually again Ambedkar is highlighting with his two essays. One, Manu's madness or the Brahmanic explanation of origin of the mixed castes. Manu's madness and the Brahmanic explanation of the origin of the mixed caste. And second, the change from paternity to maternity. Why did Brahmins wish to gain by, what did Brahmins gain to get by it? These are two, and therefore friends, we have to look that why actually the status of women started deteriorating after this. I have actually, but I'll sometimes say that, yes. But it is not only that, the status of the women have been discussed in Vedic literature, but it is also in Buddhist literature. The Buddhist literature, especially I am talking about three of them. Bhikkhuni Vidya, women of Buddhism era, Bhikkhuni Vidya, then actually Digha Nikaya and Majjhim Nikaya. These are actually three very important texts if you can really look at the status of the women. And if you want to read the modern person, one is I.B. Homer, Women under Primitive Buddhism. And in this actually one of the very important example comes from Vallabhi University. Now Vallabhi University, it is said that one of the important women leaders in that time in Vallabhi period, it was actually Srimati, who was celebrating or who was considered to be a great philosopher of Hinayana and also helped the symmetry within the Vallabhi University. Now, with these little example, we can actually talk about the women goddesses. If you look at the power of the women goddesses, nobody has tried to explain the amount of aura which these women goddesses yielded in their own areas. And they were not, of course, in the pantheon, great pantheons. Rather, they were from the marginalized sections of the society. Mariamma, Maritai, Pochamma, all these actually, lower level, you can say, goddesses which were not in the pantheon of the mainstream goddesses, they wielded power. But yet, actually, we have not got anything. Okay, having said this, friend, I come to my another point, and that is basically, I look at the personality formation within the text, within the sociological text that we have done, that what are the universal values, what are the progressive values, and how these particularistic values were brought in. And without any discussion and debates, actually without any reflexivity, we accepted those particularistic values within the text of the sociology. And therefore, friends, the important question which actually emerges is that, is there something from the Indian sociology or Indian philosophy system on the formation of the personality? A very important aspect of the society. And also, where there is a important analysis of social structure. Has anybody tried to give us, because Hindu social structure is only taught to us that look, there are 4 varnas and there is a 5th also, but nobody tells where the 5th is. Even the great Louis Dumont has not told us, okay, the French philosopher, okay. So but I think, Manusmriti bails us out a very, very important, structural formation, and then I will come to the personality formation. Time. Yeah, Manusmriti, and this I am again drawing from Babasaheb Ambedkar. Babasaheb Ambedkar argues that Manu's classification of the Hindu social order comes from Manusmriti. Now, he tries to first classify the Hindu social order into the two groups. One is Vedikas, another is Dasyu. Vedikas and Dasyu. And then he divides Vedikas into 4 parts or subdivision. What are these 4? The first subdivision, those inside Chaturvarnya, and 2, those outside the Chaturvarnya. The third one is Vritya, and 4th is Patits. You must be knowing actually, those inside the Varna order and outside the Varna order. Vrit are the twice-born caste who have fallen down, where actually they are not given the orthodox Dvija ceremonies, and they may be mixed order. And Patits, they are outcast. Further, Manu tries to divide the outside Chaturvarnya people into 2 classes. One is Anulom and another is Pratilom. Okay? So the social structure has not been taught to us in our classroom yet. I think that's what actually I wanted to. Now, are there other sources than the epics or the Varnas or the Vedas which give us the knowledge about the Indian society? We have yet to read actually, but I think again Vivek Kumar Sarkar gives us that other than the Vedas, epics, there are 13 other sources through which we can understand Indian society. These are Kavya, Natya. Of course, Natya is basically followed by Niti-Shastra, and Niti-Shastra was written by Bharat Muni, and also this has been actually some 200 BC to 200 actually I think somewhere, but it is followed with the Navrasas also. If you look at Navrasas, then it becomes the Shrangar, Hasya, Karuna, Raudra, Veer, Bibhats, or you can say Adbhut, and also Shant. So all these rasas actually, along with the other aspects, actually give us Natya as one of the very important characteristics of the Indian society. Then comes Katha, then comes Puranas, Tantra, Itihas, Vastuvidya, Shilp Shastra, Niti-Shastra, Arthashastra, and Dharma-Shastra. Now, along with this, the 13th one is Shukraniti, which has not been discussed by anyone. I think Shukraniti is so important for Vivek Kumar Sarkar that he says Shukraniti does not discuss moksha, and Shukraniti is discussing this worldly talks, aspects, dharma. Now, dharma is not individual act, rather dharma comes with Dharma-Shastra. Artha is not again individual, it comes with Arthashastra. And Kama is not only individual, gratification. Rather, it comes with Kam Shastra or Kam Sutra. Now, having said this, Shukraniti is important according to him because at the first place, it's a manual of guidance for the king and statesman, as well as the source of inspiration for demons as well. And in second place, it is the handbook of economics, politics, ethics and whatnot. As a law book of sociology, politics and economics, Niti-Shastra of Shukracharya is a specimen of Spencerian synthetic philosophy, Spencerian synthetic philosophy according to this man. But it is more important to look at Arthashastra. And I was reading Arthashastra, that what only actually number of topics covered by Arthashastra. I think actually those who are teaching economics have never taught us. At least we have reading Karl Polanyi, we have reading actually Malinowski's, we have teaching so many things, but not even a word of Arthashastra that there is Artha exchange in that also. I think if you look at Arthashastra, at least 50 entries as small as the pharmaceutical and Ayurvedic gardens, establishment of pharmaceutical and actually Ayurvedic gardens. Not only that, taking care of disabled, livestock and also social justice institutions during the Chandragupta Maurya period. I don't know, is it because of Maurya that we have not taken note of it, or whether actually was something else. But we have not taken note of Arthashastra also, though, this man, Abul Fazl's Aine Akhbari, according to Sarkar, has actually, substantial reference of Arthashastra, and yet we have neglected. Even, the gazetteer type of aspects have not been taken care of. But friends, but that is not all. We just want to look at that along with the subject matter. What about the personality formation? How we have looked personality formation in Indian society, and can there be sources which are actually of indigenous nature? It is here, friends, that I look at that we have understood personality through Mead, I and me. We have looked actually Kule, looking glass self, and we have tried to look through id, ego and superego by Freud. But when I was looking at, now in this actually we talk about one of the very important aspect, and this is from Taittiriya Upanishad. Taittiriya Upanishad, the concept of Panch Kosha, P-A-N-C-H, Kosha, K-O-S-E, which refers 5 layers which constitute the personality or the existence. Panch Kosha. Rather than viewing human personality through a purely psychological and physical lens, the Vedantic approach treats personality as a holistic, multi-layered continuum. Holistic, multi-layered continuum that moves from gross physical exteriors to innermost spiritual core, that is Atma. Now these 5 courses are: 1, the Pranmay Kosh, Annamay Kosh, Manomay Kosh, Vigyanmay Kosh and Anandamay Kosh. Now you have a pran, actually depends upon the food, what type of food you eat, and actually you need food because you have to be, there's a biological need actually that you have to do. Then pranamaya kosh, that you take breathe and then you have power. And then manomaya kosh is sensory perception. The sensory perception, and Vigyan is basically the ethical judgment, and Anand is for celebration. But Panch Kosh does not come only with this. Rather, there are Panch Karmendri, there are 5 Karmendris, and also 5 Jnanendri. Jnanendri and actually Karmendri. Now, Hindu philosophy, especially particularly Sankhya and Vedanta, they talk about Karmendri, 5 Karmendris, and we all know, I think, if you remember, eyes, ears, nose, actually, tongue and skin. But the philosophy like, Sankhya and Vaisheshika, Vedanta. Sankhya and Vedanta, they have talked about 5 Karmendris also. Now, Karmendri, the Chakshu, the ears or the Shrota, the Grana, the Rasna, that is tongue, and the Tvacha, that is skin. I have left one. Eyes, ears, nose, that is actually, Nak, Rasna, that is tongue, and skin. These are 5 actually Jnanendriya. And now Karmendri, that is, one is hand, then legs, then Vak, vocal cord, and Payu, that actually, when you have actually, organs through you give up, then you have Visarg, that is actually, you give up actually, that is, you eliminate, that is Visarg. That is Payu. And the 5th one is the reproductory organs. So these are 5 with which the culmination of a personality takes place. But what has happened, that we have not been given that these actually 5 kosas have to be completed before we actually form our personality system in the Indian society. Now, friends, therefore, I think we need to revisit with actually this value system, that is universal value, progressive value, leading the particularistic value, and then coming to the subject matter other than the Vedas and Smritis. Now, how will you reach that? And that is where the question of epistemology comes. How will you reach and how will you do? Yeah, please open the door, yeah. क्या तुम लोग को नहीं लग रहा है? खोल दो, please. The 5th, actually, the last part is basically how will you do? Now, it is here, friends, that we have 9 schools of philosophy. The 3 are heterodox and 6 orthodox. Now, I am not going to deal with that. Rather, actually, I'm just telling you that how actually you can look at Charavak, Buddhism, Jainism on the one hand, that is heterodox, and then actually 6, that is Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshik, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. Now, these 6 schools are actually very important to look at, but what is important for us to know is that, what is the epistemology they use basically. Now, it is here that 6 ways of knowing has been explained in Indian society. When I was reading D.M. Dutt, 6 ways of knowing. Now, D.M. Dutt says that Western school of epistemology looks only at 2 sources. One is pratyaksha and another is inference. But it is the Indian schools have actually 6 ways of knowing. Now, we know that the Charavaka uses only one school. Charavak is the only school of philosophy in India which uses only one source, and that is pratyaksha. That means actually we can say perception. Perception is the pratyaksha. And then if we look at the Buddha and Vaisheshika, they use two sources. Buddha and the Vaisheshika, they uses two sources, perception and inference both, pratyaksha and anuman. The three, Sankhya adds third one along with perception and inference. They use Shabda Praman, that is verbal testimony also. And testimony becomes very important. The fourth, Nyayas, actually Nayikas, they add fourth. That means they add comparison also. Along with perception, along with inference, along with verbal testimony, they add fourth, and that is comparison. We have been actually reading, comparative perspective of Durkheim. Durkheim has given the comparative perspective, but here actually it existed. The fifth one is Mimamsa, and Mimamsa uses the fifth also, and that is postulation, arthapatti. If suppose something is lying here and it is not gone, then what will you do? You will assume that somebody must have taken. So that arthapatti is also one of the ways of knowing. And last, the sixth one is Vedantis actually use 6 ways of knowing, and that is anuplabdhi, non-cognition. Non-cognition is also a source of knowledge. Now, the most important aspect is that the philosophers, the epistemologists don't leave it there. They have tried to differentiate between yatharth jnana and mithya jnana. Now, actually in Western philosophy, you cannot look at that how actually they are different. But in Indian philosophy, there is a difference between mithya jnana and yatharth jnana. And therefore, friends, actually there's a difference between also janana and jnana. I think people look at that, epistemically different. Last word which I would like to have a critique of the Western philosophy through Buddhism, and this I am drawing from Theodore Sherbatsky. Theodore Schtcharbatsky, Theodore Sherbatsky, who talks about that in Western philosophy or in the world of philosophy, Aristotle's logic is considered to be the last word in the logic of the systems or system of the logics. And Kant's actually theory of epistemology is the last word. But in Buddhist sources in India in 6th and 17th century, Dignaga and Vijaykirti, they were talking about that how logic and epistemology is merged in Buddhist philosophy. And if you look at the merger of logic and epistemology, Buddhist philosophy becomes emancipatory also. Now with this, friend, I think I should stop, and this is what I wanted to say, that there are many sources which have been untapped in Indian sociology. I think if we can tap them, our sociology will be richer. Thank you.